I am recapping on what happened in the 2026 NFL Draft first round. So let's start with the first overall pick. So the Raiders picked Fernando Mendoza, quarterback out of Indiana. And then the Jets selected David Bailey, defensive end out of Texas Tech. And then the Cardinals selected Jeremiah Love, a running back out of Notre Dame. And then the Titans selected Carnell Tate, wide receiver out of Ohio State. And then the Giants picked Arvell Reese, linebacker out of Ohio State. And then the Chiefs selected Mansur Delane, cornerback out of LSU. And then the Commanders selected Sonny Styles, linebacker out of Ohio State. And then the Saints selected Jordan Tyson, receiver out of Arizona State. And then the Browns selected Spencer Fano, offensive tackle out of Utah. And then the Giants selected Francis Magoa, offensive line out of Miami. And then the Cowboys selected Caleb Downs, safety out of Ohio State. And then the Miami Dolphins selected Caden Proctor, offensive line out of Alabama. And then the Rams selected Ty Simpson, quarterback out of Alabama. And then the Ravens selected Oleva Eon, guard out of Penn State. And then the Buccaneers selected Ruben Bain Jr., edge out of Miami. And then the Jets selected Kenyon Sadiq, tight end out of Oregon. And then the Lions selected Blake Miller, defensive tackle out of Clemson. And then the Vikings selected Caleb Banks, defensive tackle out of Florida. And then the Panthers selected Monroe Frilling, offensive tackle out of Georgia. And then the Eagles selected Makai Lemon, receiver out of USC. And then the Steelers selected Max Ihenicher, offensive tackle, Arizona State. And then the Chargers selected Hakeem Messenger, edge out of Miami. And then the Cowboys selected Malachi Lawrence, edge out of UCF. And then the Browns selected Casey Concepcion, receiver out of Texas A&M. And then the Bears selected Dylan Thieneman, safety out of Oregon. And then the Texans selected Kalen Rutledge, guard out of Georgia Tech. And then the Miami Dolphins selected Chris Johnson, cornerback out of San Diego State. And then the Patriots selected Caleb Lamu, offensive tackle out of Utah. And then the Chiefs selected Peter Woods, defensive tackle out of Clemson. And then the Jets selected Omar Cooper Jr., receiver out of Indiana. And then the Titans selected Keldrick Folk, edge out of Auburn. And then finally, the Seahawks selected Judarian Price, running back from Notre Dame.